Imagine standing at the edge of the ocean, somewhere along the sun-baked coast of what we now call Turkey, and looking out across the water toward a horizon that holds no secrets you recognize, no landmarks you can name, no cities you have ever visited. And then imagine that beneath those very waters, somewhere in the cold, dark silence of the seafloor, lie the ruins of an entire world that was swallowed whole before a single human hand ever pressed reed to clay and wrote the first word we would later call history. That is not a metaphor. That is not myth. That is the geological and archaeological reality of our planet. A reality so staggering in its implications that most of us have been quietly ignoring it our entire lives, because to truly sit with it, to let it land, is to realize that everything we think we know about the story of humanity is not the whole story, not even close, not even remotely the beginning of it. We have been telling ourselves a version of history that begins somewhere around 5,000 years ago in the river valleys of Mesopotamia and Egypt, where the first kings carved their names into stone and the first farmers built their granaries along the banks of slow-moving rivers. And we have called that the dawn of civilization, the moment the light turned on, the threshold beyond which everything was darkness and primal wandering. But what if that is wrong? What if that threshold is not a beginning, but rather a middle chapter, a surviving fragment of a story that started much, much earlier, in a world so different from our own that we have barely begun to recognize its fingerprints in the dirt? This is not a documentary about aliens. This is not about ancient astronauts or pseudo-scientific fantasies. This is about something far more unsettling and far more beautiful than any of that. This is about the actual, documented, peer-reviewed scientific reality that human civilization, in some meaningful sense of that word, may be tens of thousands of years older than our textbooks have ever suggested, and that the evidence for it has been buried under glaciers, swallowed by rising seas, shattered by cataclysms so violent they rewrote the face of the earth, and scattered across archaeological sites so remote and so counterintuitive that mainstream academia has spent decades struggling to fit them into a story that was never designed to contain them. Welcome to the world before recorded history. Not the world of grunting cave dwellers and mindless nomads, but a world of astonishing complexity, of forgotten innovation, of civilizations that rose and flourished and were erased so completely that we are only now, in the early decades of the 21st century, beginning to find their shadows in the stone. To understand what may have been lost, you first have to understand something about the world in which it existed, because the Earth of 12,000 years ago was a profoundly different planet from the one we inhabit today. And that difference is not merely climatic or geological, it is civilizational in its implications. We are living right now in an interglacial period, a warm pulse between ice ages, and we have been living in it for only about 11,700 years. Before that, for roughly 100,000 years, the planet was locked in the grip of the last great glacial maximum, a period during which enormous ice sheets up to 3 kilometers thick covered vast swaths of North America, Europe, and Asia, and the world's sea levels were not where they are today, but somewhere between 100 and 130 meters lower. Read that again. 100 to 130 meters lower. That means that all of the coastlines we use today to define the boundaries of our world, the coasts of India, Southeast Asia, the Americas, Australia, the Mediterranean, the Persian Gulf, were not where they are now. They were far, far out to sea. The continental shelves that today lie beneath relatively shallow water were, during the last ice age, dry land. And not just any land. They were the most productive, most temperate, most habitable land on the entire planet, because coastal environments have always been the cradle of human complexity, offering abundant food from the sea, trade routes along waterways, and and the kind of mild, resource-rich conditions that allow permanent settlement and cultural accumulation. What this means in the most direct possible terms is that if any advanced civilization existed before approximately 10,000 BCE, its heartland would almost certainly have been coastal, and those coasts are now gone, sunk beneath the waves by the single largest and most rapid sea level rise in human memory, a post-glacial flooding event that inundated millions of square kilometers of prime coastal real estate and did so not all at once, but in great catastrophic pulses, some of which may have happened within living memory, within the span of generations, fast enough to watch, fast enough to flee, fast enough to survive and remember and turn into myth. The flood myths. We need to talk about the flood myths because they are everywhere, and not in the vague metaphorical way that skeptics sometimes like to dismiss. They are everywhere in a specific geological, almost technical way that should stop any honest person cold. There are over 200 documented flood myths from cultures on every inhabited continent, and while the details vary, the structure is eerily consistent. A great civilization or a great people lived in an earlier time. A catastrophic flood came and destroyed nearly everything. A small remnant survived and became the ancestors of the current world. The Epic of Gilgamesh, the oldest written narrative we possess, features a flood story that predates the biblical account by at least 1,000 years and describes it in nearly identical terms. The Sumerian king list, one of the most extraordinary documents to survive from ancient Mesopotamia, explicitly divides history into two eras, before the flood and after the flood, and lists kings who ruled before the deluge with reigns so impossibly long that scholars have always dismissed them as mythological. But what if those impossibly long reign numbers are not literal years, but rather something else, a different counting system, a different unit of time, a different way of recording dynasties that stretched back not centuries, but millennia into a world we cannot yet see? The ancient Egyptians had a concept they called Zep Tepi, the first time, a primordial era of gods and demigods who ruled the earth in a remote golden age before the current order of things, and the timeline they gave this age, when translated through the astronomical knowledge encoded in their sacred texts, points not to 5,000 years ago, but to somewhere between 10,000 and 36,000 years before the Common Era. The ancient Greeks spoke of Atlantis not once but repeatedly, and while Plato is the most famous source, the tradition he was drawing on claimed to be far older, a memory of a great island civilization in the Atlantic Ocean that was destroyed by catastrophic floods 9,000 years before Solon's time, which, when you do the arithmetic, places it squarely in the post-glacial flooding period, at exactly the moment when the rapid rise of sea levels was consuming vast coastal territories around the world. Now, none of this proves anything on its own. Myths are not history, but myths are not nothing either.